And when you began as the medical director, was nicotine replacement therapy available?
We were beginning to have nicotine gum. That was it.
So let me roll the tape back a wee bit here. You grew up in Kentucky. Did you ever work picking tobacco or do any of those things?
No.
You're probably familiar with green tobacco.
Yep.
Can you tell folks that didn't grow up in tobacco?
Well, when workers work with tobacco, they cut it, and sometimes they, what's called suckering it, they take off some of the secondary shoots to make the plant grow bigger, and so when they do that, they get liquid. Nicotine in the tobacco plant is liquid, and so they get liquid that's absorbed through their hands, and they get nicotine toxicity, so it's called green tobacco sickness, nausea, vomiting, and if they get a huge exposure, they can even have something like a seizure, large exposure. And people who are smokers have so much tolerance that they don't have nearly as much trouble with green tobacco illness as people who are non-smokers do. It's a real phenomenon. As an aside, my grandparents, my Happy Hurt had a tobacco barn, but never grew tobacco. He was a real mail carrier. And after my parents died, my brother and I inherited the farm, small farm, and we had this tobacco barn on the farm, and so we rented it out and didn't charge anything as long as the person would maintain it if they put tobacco in. And that got really bothering me after a few years. And I told my brother, I said, let's stop doing that, because what I'm doing now just doesn't fit very well with where I am. And he said, well, if we do that, if we don't repair it, it's going to end up falling down. I said, that's okay, let it fall down. So we stopped having any tobacco on the property, and that was really philosophically the right thing to do.
We're all, I think, probably in this room very comfortable with using approaches to nicotine replacement therapy, which are in marked contrast to the instructions and the guidance and the concerns that emerged when NRT first became available. Can you tell us a little bit about those concerns and how your practice evolved to where it is today, particularly as it relates to nicotine replacement therapy?
Yeah, for nicotine replacement therapy, it's kind of one of those things that we kind of grew up with a minimalist approach to this. All the data and all the studies were done using 2 milligram gum or 21 milligram patch, and it was because the products had limitations. The products themselves could only deliver a certain amount, and they couldn't deliver any more than that. And what we knew was that all smokers are not alike, that some smokers smoke more, some smokers smoke more aggressively. So very early on, we started measuring cocaine concentrations in the blood of the smokers and found there was a large variation from one to the other. One of our first studies.
If I may interrupt you, cocaine is a metabolite of nicotine. I assume most people know this, but I just don't want to make assumptions. So
it's a metabolite of nicotine. It has a half-life of 18 to 20 hours. So we use it to basically measure what the nicotine exposure has been over time. And the analogy is in diabetics, if you measure blood sugar, you're taking a snapshot of their glycemic control at that moment. If you measure hemoglobin A1C, you're basically measuring their glycemic control over the last few days. So cocaine does that. Nicotine has a half-life of only 120 minutes, so it's a snapshot of what your nicotine exposure is at that moment. But cocaine integrates over time what your nicotine exposure has been. By measuring that, then we can kind of gauge where the person is. And so we did a study where everyone was admitted to a clinical research unit, and we're all put on one standard dose nicotine patch. And we saw them, it actually was the prototype to develop our residential program, and we measured cocaine and nicotine concentrations every day to see what they were. And so visualize, let's see, I'll go this way. So they're admitted over here, cocaine is up here when they're smoking their cigarettes, and then within 3 days they reach steady state, and then they stay at steady state on a single dose patch every day. And what we found was that at steady state on a single dose patch, it was about half of what they were when they were smoking their cigarettes. So we knew that they were under replaced by probably as much as 50%, and these are kind of regular smokers. And so that led us to say, well, if we're only replacing about half of what they need when for cocaine, we're never going to replace that spike of nicotine. We're never going to do that. So let's at least inch the dose up to where it's close to what they would be when they're smoking their usual number of cigarettes. And we call that percentage replacement. So the idea that if their codeine concentration was 300 when they first come in, we put all those people at least on 2 patches at a time because we know that will get them close to 100% replacement. It's very much like doing diabetes management. They measure their blood sugar, put them on a dose of insulin, see how good you did, recheck their blood sugar. It's not rocket science. It's pretty simple. You can use cigarettes per day as a surrogate for that. So a person smoking 40 cigarettes a day would be well over 300 nanograms per mil of cocaine per day. So a heavier smoker, we put them automatically on 2 patches at a time. So we did a study later on where we had people randomly assigned to 2 patches, 1 patch, a small patch, and placebo, and had light, moderate, and heavy smokers in that group. And so we had people randomly assigned to the 42 milligram dose, 2 patches. They were light smokers, and we had one of them get sick. And this person developed nausea and vomiting within 30 minutes of putting the patches on. We took the patches off, the symptoms subsided, reapplied the patches, a new batch, same symptoms, broke the code, and he was on the 2 larger patches, which tells you several things. One, high-dose nicotine patch therapy is safe in heavier smokers. And even in lighter smokers, they're going to need higher doses than you might expect. And the signs of nicotine toxicity are nausea and vomiting. If they develop that, then how do you treat that? Reduce the dose. I mean, it's not real hard. So in our place right now, if you're going to be on nicotine patch, what we do is we use the longer-acting medications, nicotine patch, bupropion, and or varenicline as the base medications. And then on top of that, we'll use one of the short-acting NRT for symptom control. So the patient then can control their withdrawal symptoms urges with one of the short-acting medications. We probably use the lozenge more than any other right now. The mini lozenge is just easier to use. You have a question?
So, yeah, I was just wondering, did you just mean that you were combining varenicline with NRT, or just the side NRT?
I purposely said it that way.
Yeah.
We use the patch, bupropion, and or varenicline as our base medications. So, for example, if a person's been on bupropion before and had a partial response, they've heard about this drug called varenicline. They come in. The patient preference has a lot to do with how we do this. So we give the patient a menu. These are the long-acting ones. These are the short-acting ones. We're going to pick 1 or 2 from over here and 1 or 2 from over here. Let's talk about those that you've had some experience with. And the patient will tell you, you know, I've used the patch and it didn't seem to work very well. Well, tell me more about that. Well, I used a patch and I had withdrawal symptoms and urges to smoke that were pretty powerful. And the next question is, well, did you ever consider using more than 1 patch? Because that 1 patch didn't control your symptoms. It doesn't mean that it failed. It just means that it didn't control your symptoms. So you begin that conversation. It's kind of a negotiation. But they come in and say, I had kind of a good response with this bupropion stuff before, but